She called him a nobody in court. 7 minutes later, he was the one putting her in handcuffs. It all started on a Thursday morning in downtown Toledo, Ohio. The kind of morning that smelled like rain even though the sun was out, making the air feel heavier than it should. Inside courtroom 4B of the Lucas County Courthouse, every seat was filled. Journalists, law students, even a few random folks who just had nowhere else to be. They all came to watch what was supposed to be a routine hearing, but word had gotten around. Something about shady deals, missing evidence, and a powerful judge who was finally being questioned. Detective Marcus Ellington sat in the witness chair, one hand resting flat on the Bible he had just sworn on, the other nervously tapping his knee under the table where no one could see. He wasn't new to courtrooms, not by a long shot, but today felt different, not because of the case itself, but because of who was watching. At the bench sat Judge Lorraine Winslow, a woman with a reputation you could slice through like butter. She wasn't the kind of judge who smiled or asked polite questions. No, Winslow barked. She barked orders, rolled her eyes at answers she didn't like, and treated public servants like Marcus as if they were barely worth the time it took to speak to them. Marcus had worked his way up from the bottom. Son of a retired city bus driver and a part-time librarian, he didn't come from a family of judges or lawyers. He came from a world where you earned everything you had by keeping your head down and your mouth shut. He knew people like Winslow looked at him and saw a pawn, not a player. Still, he told himself to stay calm, stay focused, stick to the facts. The prosecutor, a young woman named Naomi Berg, was guiding him through the basics. Where he was the night the evidence went missing, how he found the first clue, who he reported it to. She kept her voice steady, but Marcus could feel Winslow staring at him over her wire-framed glasses, each look another slap in the face. He answered carefully, his words clipped and respectful. The courtroom buzzed with whispered side conversations, the kind that happen when people expect drama, but aren't sure if they're going to get it. Then, just as Naomi was about to move on to the big questions, the ones that could tie a sitting judge to a full-blown corruption scandal, Winslow did something no one expected. She leaned back in her chair, sighed dramatically, and waved her hand like she was swatting away a fly. "You're just a nobody trying to play hero," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. For a second, the whole room froze. You could have heard a paperclip hit the floor. Marcus didn't move. He didn't flinch. He just sat there, looking straight ahead, his jaw tightening slightly. He had spent a lifetime swallowing moments like this, moments where people in power reminded him exactly where he stood. But this time, something different stirred inside him. And that small flicker of something stronger than pride kept burning even as the judge moved on like nothing had happened. Marcus stayed frozen for a heartbeat longer than he needed to. The whole courtroom was waiting for his reaction, waiting to see if he'd lose his cool. But he didn't. He simply shifted in his seat, straightened his back, and turned his eyes toward Naomi, silently signaling he was ready for the next question. Naomi hesitated for just a second. You could tell she wasn't sure if she should pretend like nothing happened or defend him somehow, but she chose the only option she could. She pressed on. "Detective Ellington," she said, her voice firmer now, "can you tell the court what you found at the evidence locker?" Marcus nodded, keeping his voice even. "Yes, ma'am. The security log showed that a set of critical files were checked out by a clerk under a forged authorization, and those files were never returned." Murmurs ran through the courtroom again. Even the jurors, who had been half asleep when things started, leaned in a little closer. This was big, bigger than anyone had expected when the case first hit the docket. Judge Winslow tapped her pen against the bench, clearly annoyed at the attention shifting back to Marcus. He went on, explaining how he traced the forgery back to someone who worked directly under the judge's office. He didn't throw wild accusations, didn't use loaded words, just the facts, as clean and cold as a polished stone. Winslow, though, wasn't having it. She interrupted him mid-sentence, pretending to clarify, but really just trying to cut him off. "So what you're telling us, detective," she said, her voice thick with sarcasm, "is that you, with your vast credentials, managed to stumble upon a case everyone else missed?" Marcus looked her straight in the eye. "I'm telling you that when you do your job long enough, you notice when things don't add up." The crowd murmured again, a few eyebrows shooting up. Marcus hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't gotten defensive. He just answered like a man who knew exactly what he saw. Winslow leaned back in her chair, her smile tightening into something sour. For the next 15 minutes, Naomi walked Marcus through the timeline. The missing evidence, the shady authorization, the strange movements of Judge Winslow's aides in the days following. Marcus kept it together the whole time, calm, professional. But there was a tension building, thick like storm clouds in the air. Everyone in that courtroom could feel it. Something wasn't right. Marcus felt it too. Not fear exactly, more like a quiet certainty that the day wasn't going to end the way anyone expected. But, just as things seemed to be calming down, something happened behind the scenes that would change everything. The judge banged her gavel, calling for a recess. She stood abruptly, straightening her robes with a sharp tug at the sleeves, then disappeared into her chambers without a second glance toward Marcus. The moment she was gone, the air loosened. People whispered more freely. A few reporters practically ran out into the hallway, phones in hand, already drafting their headlines. Court officers shuffled around, pretending not to listen to the buzz, but failing miserably. Marcus stayed seated for a moment longer. Naomi came over, resting her hand lightly on the table between them. "You good?" she asked, her voice low. He nodded. "I'm good." But truthfully, he wasn't fine, not because of the insult. Words like that stopped cutting years ago. It was something else, something he had caught in Winslow's eyes. Not anger, not arrogance, fear. He had spent long enough questioning suspects to know when someone was hiding something. Lorraine Winslow had just shown her hand, even if nobody else had noticed it. Marcus finally stood and made his way toward the back of the courtroom, where he could breathe without all those eyes pinned on him. As he moved, a few people turned their heads, some out of curiosity, some out of respect, and maybe, just maybe, some out of guilt for not saying anything when the judge humiliated him. He found a quiet corner near a window overlooking the downtown streets. Cars honked below. The city kept moving, indifferent to the mess unraveling upstairs. Marcus slid his hands into the pockets of his jacket, feeling the cool leather of his badge holder. It grounded him, reminded him why he was there. Not to make enemies, not to play hero, just to do the job right. He checked his watch. Recess would last 15 minutes. He figured Winslow would spend most of it cooling off behind closed doors, probably telling herself she had crushed his credibility. But across the room, one of the courthouse security officers, a heavyset man named Omar Price, was fiddling nervously with his radio. Omar caught Marcus's eye, hesitated, then motioned him over with a sharp jerk of his chin. Marcus walked over calmly, keeping his face neutral. "What's going on?" he asked quietly. Omar leaned in, speaking just above a whisper. "One of the judge's clerks just came to me, said there's something you need to see, right now." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What kind of something?" Omar hesitated, glancing around. "Said it's about the judge, and it's bad." Marcus felt his heartbeat pick up, steady and heavy like the first drops of rain before a storm. "Where's the clerk now?" Marcus asked. Omar nodded toward a side hallway leading to the judge's private offices. "Waiting, but we gotta move quiet. Judge Winslow doesn't know yet." Marcus didn't hesitate. He adjusted his jacket, straightened his badge so it was visible, and nodded once. "Let's go." But even as they walked toward the side door, Marcus had no idea just how deep the rabbit hole was about to go. The hallway leading to the judge's chambers was colder than the main courtroom, the kind of cold that didn't come from air conditioning, but from bad memories settling into the walls. Marcus walked beside Omar, boots muffled against the old tile floor. They found the clerk waiting near a maintenance closet, a skinny guy with wire-rimmed glasses and a look that said he was 2 seconds away from bolting. "You're the one who asked for me," Marcus said, keeping his tone low but firm. The clerk nodded frantically. His badge read, Evan Hart. "I don't want any trouble, sir," Evan whispered, "but I saw something. Judge Winslow, she's got an envelope, thick, sealed. She was arguing with someone on the phone, said it had to be handled before the next recess." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "What's in the envelope?" "I think it's cash," Evan said, glancing around again like the walls might rat him out. "A lot of it. She didn't lock it up either. It's just sitting on her desk. She said she needed it gone before things got messy." Marcus didn't waste time asking why Evan was coming forward now. Fear makes people act fast when they think the ship's about to sink. He turned to Omar. "Get another officer, quiet as you can. Nobody tips off the judge. Nobody moves until I say." Omar nodded and peeled off, disappearing around the corner. Marcus looked back at Evan. You did the right thing coming to me. Stay out of sight until this is over. The kid nodded, relief washing over his face, and hurried down the hall. Marcus adjusted his badge and moved toward the judge's chambers. His mind was sharp, calm, already running through the checklist. Probable cause, immediate risk, chain of custody. He had no intention of botching this. Outside the chamber door, he paused. He could hear Winslow's voice inside, muffled but sharp. No, I told you, she snapped. It's handled. After today, nobody will be able to touch me. Marcus knocked hard enough to cut through the conversation. Silence. Then the shuffle of papers, the scrape of a chair. Who is it? Winslow barked. Detective Ellington, Judge. Court security asked me to check something. A pause, long enough to mean she was deciding whether to open the door or climb out the window. Finally, the door cracked open. Winslow's face appeared, stretched into a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. Is there a problem, Detective? She said sweetly, like she hadn't just called him a nobody 20 minutes ago. Marcus kept his own face neutral. Mind if I step inside, ma'am? Winslow hesitated again. A hair too long, enough to tell Marcus she knew she was cornered. Actually, she said, trying to close the door, I was just finishing. Marcus gently but firmly pushed the door open wider, stepping inside before she could stop him. And there it was. Sitting on her desk, plain as day, a thick manila envelope bulging at the sides. Marcus caught a glimpse of the green edges of $100 bills inside before Winslow snatched the envelope and tried to hide it behind her back. It was over. You're under investigation, Judge Winslow, Marcus said calmly, reaching for his cuffs. Place the envelope on the desk and put your hands where I can see them. Winslow's face twisted, part rage, part panic, part disbelief that a man she thought so little of could be the one standing over her now. But she wasn't the type to go down easy, and the next few minutes would push Marcus's patience to its limits. For a second, it looked like Judge Winslow was going to fight. Her fingers tightened around the envelope like it was a life raft. You don't know what you're doing, she hissed. You're ruining your career for nothing. Marcus didn't blink. Put it down, now. Behind him, Omar and another court officer, a younger guy named Deshawn Briggs, arrived, blocking the doorway. Reinforcements, silent witnesses. Winslow's eyes darted around, calculating. There was no way out, no alley to duck into, no way to lie her way past what was right there in the open. Slowly, stiffly, she placed the envelope back on the desk. It hit the wood with a heavy thud, like it knew it was carrying the end of her career. Marcus stepped forward, pulled out his handcuffs, and spoke the words with a calm that only made the moment hit harder. Lorraine Winslow, you're under arrest for evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and official misconduct. She stiffened as he clicked the cuffs around her wrists, metal on bone. The woman who had mocked him as a nobody now stood trembling under his authority. Marcus guided her away from the desk, reading her rights in a steady voice that echoed off the walls of her office. Every word carried weight, not anger, not revenge, just a clean, unshakable certainty that the truth mattered. Outside the chambers, whispers exploded like popcorn. Word traveled fast in a courthouse. Court officers and clerks leaned out of doors, craning their necks to catch a glimpse. Marcus kept his grip gentle but firm as he led her out. Some part of him wanted to feel something, triumph, satisfaction, even pity. But what he felt was something different, something heavier. This wasn't just about one bad judge. It was about everyone she had stepped on, everyone she had silenced because they didn't come from the right family or wear the right badge. Winslow kept her chin high as he walked her through the hall, but her face had gone pale, and her hands, cuffed behind her back, twitched nervously. The same reporters who had chased Marcus with their cameras earlier were now chasing her, shouting questions. Judge Winslow, is it true you accepted bribes? Who were you protecting? Did you really think you could get away with it? Winslow said nothing. She just kept walking, her eyes forward, her mouth pressed into a thin, angry line. At the bottom of the courthouse steps, a patrol car waited. Marcus helped her into the back seat like any other suspect. No special treatment, no last-minute favors. As he shut the door behind her, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the window. Tired eyes, set jaw, steady hands. He wasn't a nobody, not today. But just because justice had been served didn't mean the story was finished. And what came next would leave a mark far deeper than anyone saw coming. The news hit Toledo like a thunderclap. By nightfall, every major station had picked up the story. Judge Lorraine Winslow, once seen as untouchable, arrested by a man she'd tried to humiliate just hours earlier. Marcus sat alone at a corner table in a diner off Dorr Street, the kind of place where the coffee tasted like it had been brewed straight from stubbornness and burnt hope. The neon sign outside buzzed in the window, casting a soft red light over the Formica tables. He stared at the cup in front of him, untouched. His badge sat on the table beside it, not out of arrogance, but because it felt heavier tonight, like it had absorbed everything that had gone down. The door jingled, and Naomi Berg slid into the seat across from him. She didn't say anything at first, just nodded in that way people do when there aren't words big enough for what just happened. "You did good today," she said finally, her voice low. Marcus shrugged. "Just did my job." Naomi smiled a little. "Yeah, that's what scares them the most." They sat there in silence for a minute, listening to the clink of forks against plates, the low hum of conversation around them. Life kept moving, just like it always does. But Marcus knew better than most that life didn't really move on. It just folded the scars into the background. He thought about Winslow, about the years she'd spent tearing people down, making sure no one ever thought to challenge her. Somewhere along the way, she had started believing the courtroom belonged to her, not to the law. And in the end, it hadn't been some big-shot lawyer or a powerful politician who brought her down. It was the nobody. The quiet man who kept his head down, who remembered that doing the right thing doesn't require permission from anyone. Naomi finished her coffee and stood up, tossing a few bills on the table. "You should be proud," she said, pulling on her jacket. "Not a lot of people would have had the guts to stand their ground." Marcus looked up at her, a tired smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. "Pride's not the point," he said. "Making it right is." Naomi paused, nodding slowly. Then she left, the door jingling softly behind her. Marcus sat there a while longer, thinking about his father, who had once told him that your name is the only thing you carry into every room you ever walk into. It had nothing to do with titles or paychecks, just your name, and whether people could trust it. He slipped his badge back into his jacket, dropped a tip on the table, and stood up. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, but it woke him up in a good way. As he walked to his car, he thought about all the kids growing up who would hear what happened today, and maybe start to believe that standing up for what's right didn't require a title or a famous last name or even permission. It just required you. It required the kind of quiet strength that doesn't need applause. It required a choice, made over and over again, even when no one's watching. Because the truth doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to the ones who are willing to protect it, no matter what it costs. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, share it with someone who needs that reminder today. And remember, the world changes when regular people choose to stand their ground.